engaged in acts of terrorism.
The strike also killed the deputy commander of Iran-backed militias in Iraq known as the Popular Mobilization Forces. Daniel Davis is a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities.
The timing really couldn't have been any worse because we had just got things calmed down from the protests against the embassy, and this is almost certainly going to flame those back up. Now, look, I mean, nobody's going to shed any tears in the United States over Soleimani because he had a lot of American blood on his hand. But this places a target on the back of all American military forces and diplomatic forces over there. Now then, we run the risk of potentially getting caught up in the cycle of retaliation and escalation, which could potentially result in war, and that is in nobody's interest.
Former Vice President Joe Biden warns that President Trump just tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox by ordering the killing of the general. In sports, in the NBA, the Nets lost along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils beat the Islanders 2-1. The Rangers lost along with the Bruins. NFL news, there's word the Cowboys released Jason Garrett as head coach. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. 6:20 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. John Sylvia joins us now, founder of Dynamic Economic Strategy, as we continue to watch this flight to safety following the strike that killed General Soleimani. John, what do you see as the market implications should tensions continue to escalate in the Middle East?
Well, I think the initial reactions are pretty much what you see: a higher price of oil, a sell-off in equities as a risk-on kind of asset. There was a mention in your report earlier that the yen was up. I suspect the Swiss franc is up also. Those are safe haven assets. So that's, I think, the first line of impact. Second, what you're seeing is probably, once again, U.S. Treasuries are rallying because, again, people looking at risk off, so they want to buy the U.S. Treasuries. I think you're going to see in Europe a negative impact because Europe trades, and especially Germany, trades so much with respect to the Middle East that I think any concerns there are going to be felt. Obviously, the Israeli stock market will probably take a hit as well. So I think that's it. But I will, if you don't mind, Nathan,
sure.
Disagree with some of the comments that were made. The reality is, they talk about the threat of military conflict, but they also said there's blood on American hands. He had plans to kill Americans and do this. We were already in a military conflict. To argue that perhaps if we do something, we'll get a military we're already in a military conflict. It has been escalating for years. And I would say that, yes, this is probably not a one-off. So the implication for financial markets is probably going to be for the next 6 months to a year with respect to working out something to reduce the tensions, if that's, in fact, the way we go. Or we may see this continued conflict cropping up.
We'll continue to follow the implications of that for some time, but I want to get your take on what we could see from the Fed later this afternoon when we get the minutes from the December meeting. Does this situation in the Middle East make this even older news, or are there certain things you're going to be looking for in the report today?
I think it makes it older news that the Fed, at least in December, felt that they were in a good place in terms of monetary policy. It does suggest to me that looking at this with the risk-off sentiment in the marketplace, the Fed is far less likely to move in the first half of 2020.
So in terms of what we could see in terms of policy from the minutes later today, I mean, the chairman had talked about there would need to be a material reassessment of the outlook in order to change policy. What constitutes a material reassessment of the outlook for you?
Yeah, it's interesting, Nathan, with respect to that comment, because international events such as this situation with Iran could be a material impact on the overall outlook. It's going to lead to caution. Caution leads to less arrogant demand. I would suspect that certainly in our trade front, export orders will slow down. The Fed may be faced with a slower economy than they had expected. And given that we're already looking at something like a 2% economy, maybe 1.75% economy, slowdown may in fact prompt them by the second quarter or the third quarter this year to ease again in terms of lowering the federal funds rate and expanding the balance sheet.
Good to have you with us this morning. Thanks so much. John Sylvia, founder of Dynamic Economic Strategy. The Fed Minutes out at 2 p.m. Wall Street time. We will have full coverage for you here on Bloomberg Radio. Ahead of that, regional Fed presidents Charles Evans and Loretta Mester speak with Bloomberg's Michael McKee from San Diego at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. respectively. You can hear those interviews right here on Bloomberg Radio. Watch them on Bloomberg Television. S&P futures right now lower by 42 points. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Record highs on Wall Street to kick off 2020, but we are headed for a very different open this morning with Dow futures down almost 400 points and oil surging 4% amid escalating tensions between the U.S. and Iran after a U.S. drone strike killed a top Iranian general in Baghdad. Dow futures down 376, NASDAQ futures down 145, S&P futures down 47, and crude oil at $63.72 a barrel. The auto industry today delivers its final sales figures for last year. Researchers say that car makers probably sold more than 17 million new vehicles for a fifth year in a row. We also hear from the Fed. This will be the first time we hear from Fed officials in 2020 as they release the minutes from their most recent meeting. We get some economic data today. The Institute for Supply Management issues its monthly manufacturing snapshot, and we'll get the government's November construction spending report. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite Advisory.
Well, today, I actually remembered my bag for life. Oh, and I put the bins out for the neighbours, they're on holiday. And the other day, I slipped on black ice with 4 pints of milk. So yeah, I definitely deserve it.
Treat yourself this winter. Save on phones, tablets and SIMs in the O2 Winter Sale. Search O2 Winter Sale.
Ends 5th of February 2020. O2 Refresh Credit by Telefonica UK Limited. Eligibility and terms apply.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It is 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date in the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. stock index futures and bond yields are falling after a U.S. airstrike killing one of Iran's most powerful generals. Qasem Soleimani, who led militias across the Middle East, died in a strike in Iraq. We get more from Bloomberg International editor Jody Schneider.
This was one of Iran's most powerful generals. The Pentagon is saying that this came at the direction of President Trump and that it's a decisive action that was taken as a defensive action to protect U.S. personnel by killing this general. They said he was actively developing plans to attack U.S. diplomats and service members in Iraq and throughout the region.
The airstrike was ordered by President Trump. It sent global stocks tumbling on fears of an armed confrontation. Barbara Slavin is senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and director of the Future of Iran Initiative.
I'm not sure Donald Trump understands the implications of what he has unleashed. He thinks he's a big hero, but a lot more people are probably going to die because of this.
And Senator Lindsey Graham is praising the president's move, saying the price of killing and injuring Americans has just gone up.
Oil futures surged more than 4% following the attack. Stephen Shork is an oil analyst and president of the Shork Group.
The market is not positioned for this event. So if we begin to broach that $65, $66 range, you're going to have a lot of option riders that are going to go into a panic, which could really propel a short-term spike in price.
And checking markets now, NYMEX crude oil is up 3.9%, up $2.38 at $63.56 a barrel. And Brent up 4%, up $2.68 at $68.93.
We'll have more on the ramped up tensions throughout the morning here on Bloomberg Radio. But first, it is a busy day on the economic front. We get a reading on manufacturing from ISM, and the Fed releases minutes from its December meeting. Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice reports.
Bloomberg Economics advises investors to keep their eyes peeled for comments indicating what it would take for Fed officials to alter their wait-and-see stance. The officials' Bloomberg Economics notes are keen to stay on the sidelines during an election year. 13 of 17 officials forecast no change in rates in 2020. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Vinny, thank you. We'll also hear directly from two Fed officials today. Tune in for comments from Chicago Fed Presidents Charles Evans and Cleveland Fed Chief Loretta Mester. They sit down for interviews with Bloomberg's Michael McKee at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Wall Street time. S&P futures are down 44 points this morning. Dow futures down 356 and NASDAQ futures down 141. The 10-year Treasury up 22/30 seconds. The yield 1.80% and the yield on the 2-year 1.52%. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 6:33 on Wall Street. Now let's get more on what's happening around the world from Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Nathan, thank you very much. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden says President Donald Trump has, quote, tossed a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox with the targeted killing of Iran's top general in an airstrike at Baghdad's international airport. Biden, in a statement, says while no American will mourn General Qasem Soleimani's passing, President Trump owes the American people an explanation of the strategy and plan to keep safe our troops and embassy personnel, our people, and our interests. The former vice president is joining other Democratic White House hopefuls in criticizing Trump's order, saying it could leave the U.S. on the brink of a major conflict across the Middle East. Presidential candidate Senator Cory Booker.
We see a president that has made folks less safe and has escalated problems in diplomacy.
Meanwhile, Republican Senator Marco Rubio of Florida said Iran was entirely to blame for bringing about the dangerous moment now before us. Here in New York, Mayor Bill de Blasio tweeted he spoke with police about immediate steps the NYPD will take to protect key city locations from any attempt by Iran or its terrorist allies to retaliate against Americans. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer dug in on his demand that the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump include new documents and testimony after revelation of administration emails that show officials question the legality of delaying aid to Ukraine. It comes as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will deliver remarks on the Senate floor today. Huge fundraising hauls by some of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates point to a long road to the presidential nomination that could crush frontrunner Joe Biden's hopes of securing an early victory. Bernie Sanders reported he'd raised $34.5 million in the fourth quarter of 2019. Pete Buttigieg pulled in more than $24.7 million. Biden had his best quarter yet, but still raised less at $22.7 million, despite leading in voter preference polls. Australians are angry as they face a wildfire crisis, and they let Prime Minister Scott Morrison know it during his visit.
How come we only had 4 trucks to defend our town? Because our town doesn't have a lot of money, but we have hearts of gold, Mr. Prime Minister.
Prime Minister Morrison.
I understand the very strong feelings people have. They've lost everything, and there is still, some very dangerous days ahead.
Hundreds of homes have been destroyed. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. Just before 6:36 on Wall Street. Now time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, the Nets knew they weren't going to have Kevin Durant this season. They thought they'd have Kyrie Irving. They haven't since mid-November. And with last night's 123-111 loss in Dallas, Brooklyn has dropped under 500, a 4th loss in a row. Luka Doncic led the Mavs with 31 points, 15 in the 4th quarter. Knicks go for a 4th straight win tonight. They're in Phoenix. Rangers were in Calgary, fell behind early, scored 2 goals in 25 seconds to tie the game at 2. They then tied it at 3, but the Flames won 4-3. Devils topped the Islanders 2-1. College hoops, heartbreak for Columbia, lost at Maine on a 3-pointer at the buzzer of overtime. Fordham dropped its A-10 opener at VCU. Hofstra blown out at home, lost by 27 to William & Mary. Northeast Conference wins for Wagner and St. Francis. Dallas Cowboys have reportedly cut ties with their longtime coach Jason Garrett. The Giants will today interview Mike McCarthy, who once won a Super Bowl with Green Bay. Some have wondered why the Giants fired Coach Pat Shurmur and not General Manager Dave Gettleman.
Just to be clear, there were substantive discussions between myself and ownership regarding my job performance and vision moving forward over the past few weeks. So John and Steve made their decisions, and here I stand. And before we go any further, I just want to be clear, Pat Shurmur is as fine a man as I've ever worked with.
NFL playoffs kick off tomorrow. The AFC wildcard games, Buffalo at Houston, Tennessee at New England. Patriots haven't lost an AFC playoff game since 2015. They haven't lost one at home since 2012. Domingo Germán, who won 18 games for the Yankees and then stopped pitching after a domestic violence incident, has been suspended for the first 63 games of 2020. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. Coming up today, the auto industry releases its final U.S. sales figures for 2019. Here with a preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Car makers probably sold more than 17 million new vehicles for a 5th consecutive year, despite a dip in December and 4th quarter deliveries, according to market researchers. Sport utility vehicles were a force at the end of 2019. Edmunds predicts SUVs seized more than 50% of the market in the 4th quarter, and that the market share for pickups topped 19% for the first time since 2005. J.D. Power estimates that records were set in December for both average transaction price and incentive spending. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, Larry, thank you. It is 6:38 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Don't get too nostalgic about old media. I'm Justin Fox, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. When William Greider worked for a couple of summers at the Cincinnati Post in the 1950s, the other reporters were high school grads from modest backgrounds. The paper cast itself as a feisty tribune of the working class. Greider, who died last month at 83 after an illustrious journalistic career, grew up in an affluent Cincinnati suburb and graduated from Princeton. He worried a lot that, as the ranks of America's news media filled up with people like him, it was leaving much of its audience behind. In a prescient 1992 book, Grider described talk radio as a rising alternative to an ever more credentialed establishment media and predicted that the internet would similarly disrupt the mainstream. He wasn't sure, though, whether this would revitalize democracy or debase it. Almost 3 decades later, that's still the big question. I'm Justin Fox. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report. Here's John Tucker.
As momentum for paid family leave has increased recently, small businesses are often front and center in the arguments for and against it. Critics of the mandates that would give workers paid time off say the additional financial burden will force small businesses to close. 8 states and the District of Columbia have passed paid family and medical leave measures funded through a payroll tax on either workers or businesses. John Ahrensmeyer, founder and CEO of Small Business Majority, contends that small business owners know it makes good business sense to take care of their employees, as it's crucial to retaining a productive and talented workforce. But unfortunately, many small employers don't have the resources to offer the leave. He's among those pushing for a national paid family and medical leave insurance program instead of a patchwork of state programs. And that's the Bloomberg Small Business Report. I'm John Tucker.
Okay, John, thank you. S&P futures are lower now by almost 44 points, a drop of 1.3%. Dow futures down 352 points. NASDAQ futures lower by 134 points. That's a loss of 1.5%. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is a blue.
Hello, I'm here at the Race for Life, joined by Kerry Cole. Kerry, what inspired you to become a runner?
The only run I do is the school run. My husband and kids, Liam, stop that, are walking this 5K with me. Claire, put your shoes back on to beat cancer.
And what would you say to others thinking of following in your footsteps?
I'd say, put that down. I'd say it's a great day out, even if your family drives you mad.
We're not athletes, we're cancer beaters. Sign up to Race for Life now and get 30% off entry until the 31st of January in partnership with Tesco.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's superfast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we
we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the Favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
News and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report. U.S. airstrike. An advisor to Iran's supreme leader is threatening U.S. troops in the Middle East and says this is the time to clear the region from these insidious beasts. This just hours after a U.S. airstrike in Baghdad killed Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani, a man responsible for the deaths of many American troops. Nick Payton Walsh has covered Iran for years, and he checks in from London with an assessment of Soleimani's role.
This is one of its most storied, most well-known military officials. It's effectively like if Iran killed the head of CENTCOM in the United States. You would see the United States respond incredibly fiercely towards something of this nature. So we're in massively unprecedented territory.
The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad has been closed, and the State Department is telling U.S. citizens in Iraq, many of them oil workers, to leave that country immediately. In Israel, the government is holding special meetings to determine what security steps need to be taken there as Prime Minister Netanyahu rushes home from a trip to Greece. I'm Michael Toscano.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are dropping this morning. We go to the First Word breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. That's right. U.S. futures are plunging after a top Iranian commander was killed by a U.S. airstrike in Iraq. Dow futures currently down 350 points. S&P's dropped 44, and NASDAQ futures are down 133. The U.S. 10-year yield drops to 1.8%. Gold is up 22, and WTI crude futures are up 4%. European markets are also under pressure, led by 1.7% declines in Germany. Back in the U.S. on the economic front at 10 o'clock, construction spending and ISM manufacturing, and at 2 o'clock, minutes from the FOMC. After the bell last night, Illumina and Pacific Biosciences terminated their merger agreement. And in other news, Tesla cut prices of its China-built Model 3 sedans, and Apple's price, though, was raised to $330 as RBC expects strong holiday iPhone sales. Wrapping things up, Bank of America was cut to market perform at BMO, and Ameriprise raised outperform over at RBC. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Iran has vowed harsh retaliation for a U.S. airstrike near Baghdad's airport that killed its top general and the architect of its interventions across the Middle East. The killing of General Qasem Soleimani, the head of Iran's elite Quds force, marks a major escalation in the standoff between Washington and Iran. Iran's supreme leader called Soleimani the international face of resistance. Former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, Mick Mulroy, explains why this is a big event for U.S.-Iran relations.
This
was a significant person, as Soleimani is considered a national hero and respected by most Iranians. He's the second most popular person in Iran after the Ayatollah.
The U.S. ordered its citizens to leave Iraq and close the embassy in Baghdad. A strong response from Iran is likely, according to Daniel Davis, a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities.
I can't imagine someone as high profile as Soleimani, they're not doing something in retaliation, but obviously they do have to be careful. They can't go too far, because if they themselves spark, a strong military reaction from the United States, it could literally bring down their regime. So they probably will have a measured response.
In sports, in the NBA, the Nets lost along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils beat the Islanders 2-1. The Rangers lost along with the Bruins. In the NFL, there's word the Cowboys have released Jason Garrett as head coach. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, where it is now 6:50 on Wall Street. Time to check what's going on in D.C., where the top story, as it is around the world for the markets and elsewhere, the Trump-ordered airstrike in Iraq that killed the top general in Iran, Qasem Soleimani. For more, we're joined by Brown University Political Science Chair Wendy Schiller. And obviously, Wendy, we've been watching the market implications of this apparent escalation in Middle East tensions. But what are the political implications as you see them?
Well, it makes you always a little bit nervous, right? When a president who's under domestic political strain, starts or escalates a military conflict in the Middle East. You sort of say, wait a minute, is there something about this timing? But I don't think that's what was happening at all. I think there was increasing Iranian involvement in Iraq, some attacks on U.S. troops, and greater instability. And I think, Bolton's gone, but that hawkish presence in the White House that Trump has been resisting for a long time, I think it's still there in Pompeo and some other folks. So I think it was just a strong signal to Iran that the U.S. wasn't going to stand by and watch them sort of really stir things up in Iraq, among other places, and do nothing. This is an extraordinary, hit job on, about as high as you could get in the Iranian command, who was in Baghdad. It wasn't as if it was on Iranian soil. But still, it's a big, strong signal. What you have to worry about is, does this mean that Trump is willing to escalate in the Middle East, as he's saying he wants to draw down on Afghanistan, as he pulled out troops in Syria? Maybe he's coming to realize that, we can't just walk away, that there's still a lot of reasons we have to be there.
Well, it's interesting to see how the president's foreign policy has developed over this first term amid all the talk about wanting to pull U.S. troops out of foreign entanglements, particularly in the Middle East. At the same time, we have now this strike in Baghdad following the killing of the Islamic State leader al-Baghdadi just a couple of months ago. I mean, is there a way to make head or tail of what the president's foreign policy is now?
Well, I think that, it looks like it's really different from Obama, because we don't do a lot of diplomatic engagement, from the president himself. But on the other hand, it doesn't look all that different, right? You get the bad guys, so to speak, the people who are trying to engage in activities that would either threaten U.S. citizens directly or U.S. troops, and you get them. And that's what the United States has shown that it is willing to do, and it never gives up. It will come after you forever until it gets you. And I think that's consistent. That's Bush, that's Obama, that's Trump. So I think that's not inconsistent with anything else. I don't think he wants to send 50 or 60 or 100,000 troops anywhere. I think he still sees war as a loser politically for him. But I think he recognizes that this is what you do if you're the United States of America, and this is signal sending. Whether it works or not, we're going to have to see. But I think that it's not as inconsistent with former presidents as people might assume just because it's Trump.
All right. Well, you mentioned the timing here coming just before a possible impeachment trial. And of course, this is coming as we head into officially a re-election year for President Trump. How, if at all, does this change the dynamic for the president's attempt to gain re-election now?
Well, it's really interesting. It requires so much nuance. You have to pay such close attention to everything. How is Iran connected to Ukraine? Most people do not have time for that. They're not inclined to look at that, especially in a good economy. So I don't think it really complicates things too much. However, you start to think we need our allies. If we are going to re-engage in the Middle East, in any significant way. As George Herbert Walker Bush showed us, you need allies. And so this is the catch-22 for Trump. He can't be calling people up and sort of extorting and bullying and alienating them when we're, engaging or escalating Middle East conflict. We're going to need the rest of the world. And that's going to be the really tricky part for Trump. You can't go it alone here. We tried that with Bush in Iraq, and it didn't work all that well for Bush in the end. So I think that's the delicate walk, and I have no idea if this president, will be capable of doing that or is inclined to do that. But I think that's what becomes more apparent, I think, over time to the American people, is how much we actually need the rest of the world if we're going to contain the kinds of non-state actors that we think threaten us.
What about the political dance for the Democrats who are left vying in the primaries and the caucuses? We've gotten some reaction from figures like former Vice President Joe Biden saying that, the president's thrown a stick of dynamite into a tinderbox. But at the same time, General Qasemi, as we've heard from so many observers, has a lot of American blood on his hands. So what's the dance that Democrats have to pull off here?
Well, I think the easier dance is for people like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, even Tulsi Gabbard. You can say, listen, we don't want any part of this. We do not want to be blowing, top commanders up in Iraq. We don't want to be picking a fight, if not a war, with Iran. I mean, that's just not what we want at all. And they can say, yeah, we don't want that. We've never been for that, and keep going. Biden's got a much, much tougher road to walk on, the line to walk on, because he was part of the Obama administration. He's part of all these wars. I mean, he can't walk away from this. And why is it not okay for Trump to do this when Obama did this for a lot of people all over the Middle East? So I think this is going to be very difficult for Biden. And I think if the Democrats candidates were strategic, they'd find a way to seize on this. But they're going to be worried that they don't want to look unpatriotic. So Biden's still going to be the target on this. And I think some people are going to go after him full stop, just to say this is the kind of presidency you're going to get with Biden. It's going to look like Trump in the sense of intervention, because that's what Obama's presidency was. So I think it's very tricky for Joe Biden.
In our last minute here, has President Trump made himself a war president this morning?
No, I don't think he's a war president yet, because just like Obama, in a lot of ways, you can go up to a line and then, do you cross that line? It's not like we're trying to bomb their nuclear facilities, which are, or same thing for North Korea. So at the moment, he doesn't look like that. I'm not sure the American people have the stomach or the appetite for a war. And I think he still thinks it'll cost him in the end to start a war. But the United States has been very good at doing a lot of things that come just short of war to exert its power. And I think he'll be inclined to do more of that as the election wears on. And we're going to see what the ramifications are for that.
Wendy Schiller, always good talking with you. Thanks so much for being with us this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. That's Wendy Schiller. She chairs the political science department at Brown University. You can read more, as always, on what's happening in the nation's capital. Follow all the latest developments on rising Middle East tensions. Just head over to Bloomberg.com or get all the latest on the Bloomberg terminal. And you can listen to Bloomberg Radio in Washington. A reminder on that, it's at Bloomberg 99.1 and 105.7 FM HD2. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. And those rising Middle East tensions weighing on futures this morning, with S&P futures down 44 points. Dow futures down 347, and NASDAQ futures are down 131. The DAX in Germany is down 1.8%. The CAC in Paris down 0.6%. And the FTSE 100 down 0.5%. 10-year Treasury up 20-30 seconds, yield 1.80%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil up 4.2% or $2.56 at $63.74 a barrel. Bloomberg Surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Influential conversations from
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class, skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it Run. Makes it.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super-fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Depends on trade deals. In many of these countries, we've still seen people struggling.
Finance.
We're in this vortex of uncertainty. These big companies, they just sometimes lack focus.
Investment.
The markets have become a little bit too addicted to the Fed.
Timing the market is just so difficult.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, U.S. airstrikes in Iraq killing one of Iran's most powerful generals, sending oil markets rallying as Iran's supreme leader threatens severe retaliation, sending stock markets rolling over as geopolitical risk grips investor sentiment. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Friday. Here is your Friday morning price action. Equity futures down and down hard, negative 44 points on the S&P 500. We're down 1.36%. In the FX market, what you would expect, the dollar bid, the Japanese yen, the haven story outperforming. In the bond market, treasuries rally, yields are lower by 7 basis points to 180 on a US 10-year. And we're on 70 watch, Tom Keene, on Brent crude, $68.97, positive 4 percentage points on the session.
Really important conversations this morning. We'll drive that forward through all of Bloomberg Surveillance. Today, I know Amrita Sen will join us some energy aspects. That's on the markets as well. 2 ideas. This is a huge day, John. I have the clearest memories of being with Nora Rabini at the Mike Milken soiree in Los Angeles the day of the killing of Osama bin Laden. I don't believe it's that equivalent, but for our global audience, this is America transfixed by the moment.
For our listeners worldwide, perhaps our audience waking up here in the United States, we begin with our top story. Tensions escalating in the Middle East after President Donald Trump ordered an airstrike in Iraq, killing one of Iran's most powerful generals. The U.S. Defense Department writing in a statement, at the direction of the president, the U.S. military has taken decisive defensive action to protect U.S. personnel abroad by killing Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, a U.S. designated foreign terrorist organization. Iran's supreme leader swiftly responding, writing the following: a severe retaliation awaits murderers who have the blood of Soleimani and that of other martyrs on their wicked hands from last night's incident. We are pleased to join us by Nick Wadhams, Bloomberg State Department reporter. He joins us on the phone. Nick, my first question is decisive action from this administration, action that Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama did not take. Why has this administration chosen to do so?
Well, President Donald Trump has always said that he would do what was necessary and respond with the greatest force possible and the most force required to protect what he sees as U.S. interests. The big question that's being asked right now, sort of in the national security community, is whether he's thought out the consequences. So there's no doubt among the United States officials that Qasem Soleimani was a bad guy. He had, according to the State Department, was involved or responsible for the deaths of some 600 U.S. troops in Iraq. So the question now is, what is the off-ramp? Mike Pompeo tweeted this morning that the U.S. is still interested in de-escalation, but no one really knows where we go.
Nick Wadhams, this is so important that we lead with you in this hour because of your experience not only with Secretary of State Pompeo, but also with Secretary Tillerson. This is an original administration with original responses. How different is this moment with a unique Trump administration and this Pentagon versus a more traditional administration and a Pentagon?
Well, it's a great question because This is how they've shown they do everything when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, remember a couple years ago, it just seemed unfathomable that President Trump would meet the leader of North Korea, and then suddenly there they were shaking hands in Singapore. This is a president who puts a lot of stock in his own ability to achieve deals. And
yeah, but Nick, he's not going to do the art of it. Nick, he's not. I don't mean to interrupt, Nick, but you're the pro at this. How do you do an art of the deal with a nation, a people whose, from what I can tell, war hero has just been murdered? I mean, that's how they perceive it in Kerman, Tabriz, and Tehran, isn't it?
Right, and that is the central flaw of the argument and the big question going forward. The U.S. claims that this was a defensive action and that it's still interested in de-escalation, but obviously, as you guys mentioned, the response from Iran right now is there is absolutely no interest. And that's been the problem bedeviling Donald Trump for the last 2 years. He got out of the Iran nuclear deal, and then he said he wanted a deal without preconditions. Iran so far has had absolutely no willingness to play ball. So it looks like the president's strategy so far toward Iran is not working.
Well, let's talk about the strategy in the broader region. Two events over the last 12 months that stand out for me: the attack on Saudi oil facilities back in September. The United States, the Trump administration, chose to do nothing. Then we had the Trump administration pulling out of Syria. Russia moved in. The United States chose to do essentially nothing. Nick, what was the red line that has been crossed in the last week that has made the United States push forward with decisive action?
Well, the administration has always said that attacks on U.S. troops would be something that was the red line, that would provoke what Secretary Pompeo called a decisive response. You saw that a few days ago when the U.S. killed 24 militia members. And then, obviously, today we're seeing the true limits of what the administration means by a decisive response. The big question also is whether they felt provoked into this action because of the criticism that the administration faced over the fact that it really hadn't done something. And of course, President Trump's defenders will say, "Well, look, we're not the ones who are instigating here. This is a response to sustained aggression by the Iranian forces." And something that they deserved and frankly had coming.
Nick Wadhams, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. With Bloomberg News, with true expertise on the U.S. State Department. As the story continues, John, of course, you'll bring in our next guest, Amrita Sen. Edward Morris at Citigroup publishes moments ago, and he says this news of Iraq should push oil prices higher. He says, obviously, through 70 a barrel. But very importantly, Ed Morris, with his knowledge of oil and also Saudi and the geopolitics of the Middle East, suggests later in 2020 there would be mitigating factors to drive oil lower.
We turn to the oil market now. We do that with Amrita Sen, Chief Oil Analyst at Energy Aspects. Amrita, fantastic to have you with us. Tremendously difficult to put a price on geopolitical risk. We go back to September, where drones were used to attack Saudi Aramco facilities. September 14th. Oil closed exactly where it was the Friday before the attacks by the end of the month. Many people looking at this situation and wondering at what point does this move begin to fade. Amrita, how different is this situation that we wake up to this Friday morning?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly the question to ask. But the difference is the red line was breached, which is attack on U.S. personnel and U.S. facilities, and I think that's why there was an attack, right? Whereas with the attack on Saudi Arabia, it was made very clear that the U.S. is not going to get involved. And I think that's where the difference is. But also remember, we haven't seen that kind of a move. It was like a $10 move under the Saudi. This has been more of a 3 to 4% move. The market's already tight. The issue in many ways is that this is going to get played out over a long period of time. Iran isn't reckless. They're not going to come back tomorrow and there's not going to be retaliation just yet, right? It is going to get played out over time, and the risk is of sectarian violence in Iraq, and then it becomes a question of, do you start getting production affected in the region? You've already seen foreign workers being evacuated. I think U.S. foreign workers are being evacuated. What does that mean for long-term production in the country? Let's say we disagree on whether the market is tight or not. Would you really be short oil over here? No. I think that's where that's kind of the clear difference also, because this is coming at a time when the Saudis have clearly said that they will be supporting the floor at $60, and so they've cut production even more.
Yeah.
So it's quite a different backdrop.
And Rita, you've touched on Iran's response. They say they will respond. Let's talk about it in greater detail. The pressure within Iran to respond will be sky high. As Tom points out, this particular general, incredibly popular in the country. The question is how, the question is where. Do you see them frustrating oil infrastructure, delivery channels, the Strait of Hormuz? Do you see that happening in the coming month?
I think they'll absolutely keep all their options open. But if the red line, which again in some ways, the Iranians had been poking to see where the red line was for the U.S., it wasn't the drone strike, it wasn't really a huge attack on one of its allies, but it was very much on direct U.S. personnel. If they know that's the red line, they probably are not going to go for anything similar there again, right? But yes, attacks on other countries' oil and gas facilities or on the Straits of Hormuz on shipping, which we've already seen, by the way, over the course of the last year, absolutely very possible. But again, I keep coming back to Iraq. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Iraq, and particularly kind of to push out the pro-U.S. forces from Iraq. I think, unfortunately, Iraq could just become the battleground and the geopolitical flashpoint for 2020.
Now, we've heard that from others. Amrita Sen, thank you so much for your acute analysis this morning. John, she was brilliant earlier on the distinction of the heavy crude of Iran and how that folds into Asian consumption of oil.
Iran's response, that will be the focus of many of the questions today, Tom. What will it be? Will it be in Iraq with Iran-backed militias? Will it be around oil infrastructure in the region? And then we've got to define what war could possibly look like. We've been talking about proxy wars in the region for a long time now, Tom. Direct forces meeting direct forces. What does that look like in the Middle East, and who would participate if it goes there? That's the extreme of the conversation that we could touch on later today.
Well, we will see. We see it with markets negative 50 earlier. S&P futures rather negative 42. Dow futures negative 338. We're out three big figures on the VIX, 15.75. And yields come in. And now with the news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, John, thank you very much. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton is congratulating all involved for eliminating Iran's top military commander. Bolton said in a Twitter post today that long in the making, this was a decisive blow against Iran's malign Quds Force activities worldwide. Iran's supreme leader has vowed harsh retaliation for the U.S. airstrike near Baghdad's airport that killed the head of Iran's elite Quds Force Major General Qasem Soleimani. Meanwhile, the State Department says U.S. citizens should depart Iraq immediately and not approach the embassy. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John.
Michael Barr, thank you very much. Equity futures negative 42 points on the S&P 500. We are down by 1.28%. There is a bid in the commodity market. Crude higher by 4 percentage points, $68.91. This is Bloomberg.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine.
Welcome to Nuffield Health Fulham, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a swimming pool, and our expert team will help you get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it. Mix it.
You're listening to the sound of a Halifax customer who used to worry she wasn't saving enough, but is now saving the change every time she runs out of milk. Switch on Save the Change, and when you use your Halifax Visa debit card, we'll round up to the nearest pound and put the difference into your chosen Halifax savings accounts.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Here's Sherry Ann.
We're joined now by Wisdom Tree Japan CEO Jesper Cole. He's with us from Tokyo. Jesper, always great having you with us. So Governor Kuroda probably was breathing a sigh of relief. He had a huge stimulus package coming his way. We're talking about JGB yields within range. Could a rally in the Japanese yen derail his plans now?
Look, I think that, the one trigger for the Bank of Japan to act would be, a bout of dollar weakness and yen strength. If dollar yen, say were to begin to trade in the 95-100 range, that could really put a dampener to the outlook for the Japanese economy, for Japanese corporate profits in particular.
So give us an outlook for the Japanese economy in 2020, because we also have the Tokyo Olympics coming up and that huge stimulus package from Prime Minister Abe. How are things looking for the Japanese right now?
I think, Japan is going to go for gold, because you've got both public demand with the fiscal package and private demand with business investment and consumer spending actually on very, very solid footing. So I think that the consensus estimates for growth are way too low. This is a Japanese economy that in 2020 could easily grow by as much as 1.5% to 2%.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by SEI. With a 50-year history of innovation, SEI's outsourced solutions help achieve lasting success for investment managers, asset owners, private banks, and independent advisors. Learn more at SEIC.com. The risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year taking a hit as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates, sinking stocks and U.S. stock index futures. The yen is jumping. Japanese markets remain closed for a holiday. Oil is surging. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down 36 points this morning. Dow futures down 281, and NASDAQ futures down 111. The DAX in Germany is down 1.8%. 10-year Treasury up 18.30 yield 1.81%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil up 3.5%, or $2.13 at $63.30 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1 1/3%, or $20.40 at $15.48.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1132 against the dollar. British pound 1.3063, and the yen is at 108.09. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and John.
Karen, thanks so much. Futures negative 50. We've improved to negative 35. Karen Moscow with good data checks. John, important headlines.
Secretary Pompeo speaking to Fox News just moments ago, saying Iranian leadership understands the president will take action. The U.S. needed to take action to restore a deterrence. The president says the Soleimani strike decision was necessary. This according to Secretary Pompeo just moments ago on Fox News. That second headline, Tom. The United States needed to take action to restore a deterrence. Eurasia Group out in the last 24 hours saying the following: Iranian leaders can no longer assume that Trump is a paper tiger who will not take decisive and risky military action. This is key. Many excuses, many reasons have crossed the president's desk in the last 12 months to confront Iran. He hasn't taken the opportunity. Many people out there today may suggest he had little choice. Joining us on the phone, Mark Champion, Bloomberg senior reporter for international affairs in London, joins us on the phone right now. Mark, talk to me about that. The need to restore a deterrence. The president who was increasingly being viewed as a paper tiger. Your thoughts on that issue?
Yes, I think it is the critical issue because, here are the alternatives. One is that what happened recently in Iran, and remember that it was Iranian-backed militias in Iraq that attacked a U.S. base and killed a U.S. contractor, and then it was militias, again Iranian-backed, that attacked the U.S. embassy in response to U.S. retaliation, which had killed some of their members. So that was the background. So the question here is either what the U.S. was trying to do, and that those events provided the trigger for it, was to restore belief that it was willing to take military action in addition to the maximum pressure economic policy that it has had in trying to pressure the Iranian economy. Or one or both sides actually want a war. I think that's correct. The analysis is correct, is that they don't want a war. Neither side wants a war. But the U.S. wanted to draw a line where many of its allies in the region, Saudi and so on, for some time have been saying the U.S. was not drawing a line.
Mark, you've got such expertise on the depth of these ancient debates. Frame or triangulate the United States-Iranian battle, going back to 1979 for some of us, with the Shia-Sunni battle, which goes back centuries and centuries. Which is more important to Tehran?
It's a tough question to pose in that sense. That obviously there is these are two parallel narratives. You're absolutely right, and the Iranian relationship to the U.S. has been very dominant ever since 1979, it is no coincidence that the U.S. has been a close ally of the Iranian regime's main Sunni rivals in the region. So the two things become very intertwined, and it's kind of hard to pick them apart. Just to take an example right now, here you have the Iranian regime trying to decide how it will respond to the U.S. in a U.S. action. But among the options that it has there are, not just lobbing a ballistic missile at one of the American bases in the region, which is something that the Iranian officials have said they can do, but much more likely is that they use some of their militias in order to attack the interests of the U.S. and its allies in the region. The militias that have been working with them in Syria, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, and which Qasem Soleimani was absolutely instrumental in both putting together and using.
Well, Mark, as you point out, at the epicenter of the effort to push a sphere of influence in the region for the Shiites from Iran was Qasem Soleimani. That doesn't end with his death, though, does it, Mark? And I just wonder what the next next steps the Iranians will take to maintain that sphere of influence in the region. Many people will remember just a week ago, we had naval exercises in the Gulf of Oman between Russia, China, and Iran. What happens with some of these key allies of Iran?
Yes. On the one hand, you're absolutely right. Because Soleimani dies, that does not mean that everything that he's built suddenly goes away. It doesn't. And those remain the primary tools that are available to the Iranian regime as they decide on what to do. And then the secondary question, which is also an absolutely key question, a couple of people have already said, this is a bit reminiscent, this assassination of such an iconic figure in Iran is a bit reminiscent of what happened in 1914 with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the Austrian prince, and that, of course, began World War I. But the difference is, the question there is, so what do the other great powers do? And that goes directly to your question, right. What about Russia and China? Obviously we don't know exactly the answer, but my very strong, guess would be that this is not the same as 1914. Neither the U.S. nor Iran actually wants a war, and neither China nor Russia would be willing to go to war with the U.S. On Iran's behalf. So completely different.
As usual, we must expand the conversation with Mark Champion, and I'm sure we'll do that in the coming hours.
Thank you, Mark.
And days. He is with Bloomberg Opinion, of course, in London, our senior Middle East correspondent. John, that was extraordinary how you brought it back to the dynamics of 1914, which is really a frightening
I think Mr. Champion did that for us.
Yeah, I think
But certainly some of this history, Tom, as you point out, this doesn't just go back decades, it goes back a good century now.
Yeah, I'll put out all sorts of stuff on LinkedIn and Twitter today on that. John Farrow and I are already emailing our podcast team saying it'll be an extraordinary day for podcasts of Bloomberg surveillance. Futures, negative 36. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Wall Street is headed for an ugly open after a U.S. airstrike killed a top Iranian general in Iraq. This is also sending crude futures surging. They're up about 4% at $63.56 a barrel. We'll continue to watch shares of Apple a day after they rose above $300, adding almost $30 billion in value and bringing Apple's total market value to $1.3 trillion. The move higher came amid predictions that Apple had a strong holiday quarter. A New York dog owner is suing pet food maker Blue Buffalo, claiming its Blue Wilderness packaging deceptively markets the dog food as being inspired by the diet of wolves. The dog owner's suit alleges that the pet food contains undisclosed carbohydrates that were not a meaningful part of wolves' diets, leading to obesity in dogs and fueling canine diabetes. Blue Buffalo is owned by General Mills, was not immediately available to comment. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at Bevel.com. Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
NFL playoffs are here. Make sure you don't miss a minute of this year's postseason action by setting a reminder on TuneIn. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll send you an alert just in time for kickoff.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. It's a new year and time for you to explore new podcasts on TuneIn. What better way to celebrate the new year than taking a look back at the best podcasts from news and politics to true crime, comedy, and history favorites. We've rounded up our favorites, and there's something for everyone. Shows included Dr. Death, Bad Man, My Favorite Murder, Pod Save America. Start your new year with these podcasts and more. Just search podcasts on TuneIn today.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio, 2 hours away from the opening bell. The news you need to know this hour. Stocks falling around the world after a US airstrike killed one of Iran's most powerful generals. The latest on the geopolitical tensions in just a moment, but here's how markets are faring right now. S&P 500 futures lower by more than 1 full percentage point. The yield on the 10-year Treasury poised for the biggest drop in 3 weeks. Crude higher by 3.5%. Gold up 1.3%. A busy day ahead on the economic front. We get a reading on manufacturing from ISM at 10 Eastern Time, and the Fed releases minutes of its December meeting. We'll also speak with Chicago Fed President Charles Evans and Cleveland Fed Chief Loretta Mester. They sit down for interviews with Bloomberg's Michael McKee at 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Look out for those interviews on Bloomberg Radio and on Bloomberg TV. Now for the top stories worldwide, let's head over to Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, Tom. The Pentagon says Major General Qasem Soleimani, who led Iran's elite Quds force, was killed in a U.S. airstrike outside of Baghdad's airport. President Rouhani is promising on Twitter that Iran would take revenge against the U.S. for this heinous crime. Senator Richard Blumenthal, who serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee, spoke to ABC on the repercussions for Americans.
The Trump administration owes a full explanation of these military actions, all the facts, to Congress and the American people.
The U.S. State Department today issued a directive to U.S. citizens to depart Iraq immediately because of the heightened tensions in the region. President Trump is set to deliver remarks at a campaign event this evening in Miami, Florida. Meanwhile, global powers are warning that the world has just become a more dangerous place. China, Russia, and France, all permanent members of the UN Security Council, took a dim view of the U.S. airstrike near Baghdad's airport. A French deputy minister says we are waking up in a more dangerous world. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. It's time now for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Report. Here is John Stashower.
Jonathan, 4 local teams playing their first game of 2022 against each other. And that one, the Devils topped the Islanders 2-1 at the Coliseum. New Jersey's won a season-high 3 in a row. Rangers in Calgary lost to the Flames 4-3. All the scoring coming in the first 28 minutes of the game. The Nets were in Dallas, blew a 10-point second-half lead, fell to the Mavs 123-111. Dallas's young star Luka Doncic with 31 points. Nets have lost 4 in a row. They're in Toronto tomorrow. They'll be getting Karis LeVert back. He's been out 7 weeks with a broken thumb. It's still no sign of Kyrie Irving. Hasn't played since mid-November. College hoops, heartbreak for Columbia. Lost at Maine on a 3-pointer at the buzzer of overtime. Fordham dropped its 8-10 opener at VCU. Hofstra lost by 27 to William & Mary. Northeast Conference wins for Wagner and St. Francis. Domingo Germán, who won 18 games for the Yankees and then stopped pitching after a domestic violence incident, has been suspended for the first 63 games of 2020. Took longer than expected, but the Dallas Cowboys have reportedly decided to move on from Jason Garrett, their coach the last 9 years. The Giants looking for their new coach. They'll interview former Green Bay coach Mike McCarthy today. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Jonathan?
John Stashower, thank you very much. John with the sports, you've had the news. Here's your price action. Equity futures negative, down and down hard. We're down by more than 1 full percentage point on the S&P 500. Negative 36 points and just off session lows. In the bond market, Treasuries rally, yields decline by 6 basis points to 182 on a US 10-year. And crude exactly where you would expect it to be, up by around about 4% on Brent, $68.81. From New York, for our audience worldwide, this is Bloomberg.
From our world headquarters in New York, good morning worldwide. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM report brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology. They offer STEM professionals an accelerated 18-month executive MBA. More at njit.edu/EMBA. Here's Bob Boone.
Tom, Jonathan, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. Scientists think they can make a century-old tuberculosis vaccine far more protective simply by changing how they give it. TB kills more than 1 million people a year, mostly in poor countries. The only vaccine protects babies, but is far less effective at preventing teens and adults from getting the deadly lung infection. In tests with monkeys, researchers found the vaccine worked dramatically better when injected straight into the bloodstream instead of today's skin-deep shot. More safety studies are needed before the approach is tested in people. The findings were reported in the journal Nature. It's a rite of passage in schools across the country. Frog dissection.
It'll take a little while. You don't want to watch them. You don't have to.
Feelings about the lesson are generally summed up in one word: gross. You might recall the frog-freeing scene in the movie E.T. when Elliot decides he needs to save his frog and ends up letting all the frogs loose in his science class. Well, a Florida high school is trying to fix the gross-out factor by using fake yet highly realistic frogs. The school and the company that makes the synthetic frogs, along with animal rights groups like PETA, hope this will change how dissections are handled in classrooms across the country. And that's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM report. Tom, Jonathan.
Bob Moon, thanks so much. 5 things you need to know to start your day. Brought to you by Portfolio Analyst. Powered by Interactive Brokers, savvy investors use Portfolio Analyst to create a consolidated view of their finances and check the health of their complete financial portfolio. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com. What have I learned this morning, John? It's simple. I remember Los Angeles, May 2011. I happened to be on a stage with Noel Rubini at Milken on the killing of Osama bin Laden. And what I've learned this morning that I didn't know, Dexter Filkin's article from 2013 and others, is this gentleman, this general, was worshipped in Iran. I didn't know that.
Very popular within Iran, and to understand his story, you have to go back to the late 70s and the Iranian Revolution of 79. A young man in his early 20s going into the Iran-Iraq war and coming out of that at the epicenter of creating a Shiite sphere of influence in the region for the Iranians, at the head of this Quds force eventually for the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. And Tom, that doesn't end with the death of this commander today. That continues, and the tension in the Middle East will no doubt be flaring up. The question that I think stands in front of everyone right now is, how does Iran react. And when you speak to people with knowledge much greater than mine about the region and about these kind of issues, they will tell you that the reaction will not be swift, quick and reckless. It will be very well thought out about how to confront renewed tensions in the region.
In Washington, there are 3 presidents identified with this era. Of course, Bush the Younger, President Obama, and President Trump. Everybody's looking at the differences, John. What I find fascinating is the similarities here of a U.S. dealing with these ancient tensions in the Eastern Middle East.
Well, what I think is also interesting here, just for Qasem Soleimani to continue that conversation, Tom, is that Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama did not take this action, had the opportunity to do so, but did not take it because of the potential consequences. The problem this administration has had, much more so over the last 12 months, is the risk of the president and this administration being viewed as a paper tiger. How many opportunities has the United States had to confront Iran over the last 12 months? We've had downed drones, we've had attacked oil facilities, we've had issues in Syria, and yet still this president has not really followed through with decisive action until the last 24 hours.
I would say, off of one of my books of the year a few years ago, Garrett Graff's The Threat Matrix on the FBI and all of this after September 11th, is there's so much we don't know. I'm not sure what we know really about what Pentagon and what the different government authorities are doing. We do this with Secretary Pompeo making the rounds this morning on the different networks. For Saudi Arabia, this will be quite a focus. Remember, they are Sunni as the Iranians lead the Shiite community.
We have a series of proxy wars in the region, Tom. What we don't have is direct forces against direct forces, and I think that's the extreme tail risk that people are worried about waking up this morning, which takes you to the markets. Quite a severe reaction in equity markets to the news overnight. The equity market down by more than 1 full percentage point, the crude market with a bid. But with the crude market specifically, Tom, we go back to September when we had that attack on the Aramco oil facilities.
Right.
Crude recovered. In fact, when I say recover, it rolled back over within a month. I just wonder how quickly people will be looking to move to fade this move, or whether they view it as quite different.
This is the inside baseball. I know you'll carry this forward seriously through the morning, is what yen does. Yen is the global barometer for this. It's the thermostat, thermometer rather, if you will. Yen 108.17. When I walked in this morning, it had a 107 handle, and I'd be a lot more interested in market dynamics with a low 107 down to 106 yen. We're not there.
Just to give our listeners a feel of the FX market this morning, a nice little snapshot of G10. This is the currency majors in the FX market today. All of them weaker against the US dollar. The loonie, the Canadian dollar, the Swissy, the euro, the Danish krona, the Norwegian krona, the British pound, the Kiwi, the Aussie, the Swedish krona, with the exception of the Japanese yen. That classic haven strength, the yen outperforms all of G10 on a morning like this morning, and treasuries with a bit too. Tom, yields moving south down to in and around 180 on a US 10-year.
Well, there'll be much more through the morning. We'll have a good conversation. We've got a number of important guests scheduled, including General Kimmett, and Admiral Stavridis, I believe, is trying to be with us again. Futures were negative 50. They're now negative 36, an improvement in the tape. Dow futures, negative 286. Worldwide, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Don't want to miss a second of the NFL playoffs? Set reminders with TuneIn to stay in sync with the postseason. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when live coverage begins. Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
TikTok on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, U.S. airstrike. Government leaders in Iraq are upset the U.S. airstrike that took out Iran's top military commander happened in their country. An emergency session of parliament has been called as Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi describes the attack as a violation of conditions of the U.S. troop presence in Iraq. But U.S. military officials are saying the assassination of Soleimani was to stop imminent attacks. More from Alex Marquardt.
This was a preemptive attack to thwart future attacks against American personnel. I want to read just a little bit more of that statement from the Pentagon, in which they say General Soleimani was actively developing plans to attack American diplomats and service members in Iraq and throughout the region.
The strike also killed the deputy commander of Iran-backed militias in Iraq who laid siege to the U.S. embassy in Baghdad this week. That embassy now closed. The State Department telling Americans in Iraq they must leave the country immediately. I'm Michael Toscano.
Interconnect here.
Let's start with the national security implications of this.
Balance of Power with David Weston.
What could the United States do to help?
Weekdays at noon Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and the risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year is taking a hit as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates. U.S. stock index futures are falling. Haven assets are jumping. And oil is too. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are down about 36 points. Dow futures down 277. And NASDAQ futures down 116. The DAX in Germany down 1.7%. The 10-year Treasury up 17/30 seconds. Yield 1.81%. Yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil is up 3.7%, up $2.26 at $63.44 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1 1/3% or $20.40 at $15.4850 an ounce. The euro 1.1139 against the dollar. British pound 1.3080. The yen 108.09. Today we are watching for reports on construction spending and manufacturing at a 10 o'clock Wall Street time. Then at 2, it's minutes from the Fed's December meeting. And Apple's price target was raised to $330 from $295 at RBC Capital Markets, which wrote that it was optimistic about iPhone sales over the holiday quarter. Bank of America Global Research also raised its target on Apple to $330. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and John.
Karen, thanks so much. The President of the United States just tweeting out as a short one-sentence tweet with no cap letters. Iran never won a war, comma, but never lost a negotiation, exclamation point. Somehow I think we'll see more this morning. John, it speaks to the serious tone of this morning as we've had a quiet president through the evening and into the early morning.
Equity futures down 36 points on the S&P 500, negative 1.09%. Weighing in on the markets, I'm pleased to say, Jim Bianco Research and Bloomberg opinion columnist, joins us on the phone. Jim, your thoughts on how markets are reacting this morning and what your advice would be to clients?
I think they're reacting as we would have expected, also bearing in mind that the first week of the new year is typically the most volatile week. The concern that they have right now is supply disruptions, not out of Iran because they've already been sanctioned and don't actually supply that much to the world markets, but out of the rest of the region. As far as what a client should do or people should think about this, the trade that has worked in the post-crisis era has been the 60-40 portfolio, 60% equities, 40% bonds. And today, if you've been in that trade, which, by the way, had its best year in 21 years in 2019, your 40% leg is doing very well because we've got a very good bond rally going. I think as we move forward, that will probably be the trade that will continue to work until we get some serious inflation had in 25 years.
Jim, it worked very well in 2019. It didn't work so well in 2018. In fact, if 2019 was one of the best runs for that strategy in this bull market, one of the best years for that strategy, 2018 was one of the worst. Your thoughts on what that means for 2020, if it means anything at all?
Yeah, you're right. It did not work well. That was all the fourth quarter in 2018 when stocks fell 20% and bonds didn't do much of anything. I think that strategy really comes down to the outlook on inflation. If you get the perception that inflation is returning, both stocks and bonds fall together, and that would make that strategy not work. For now, we don't have that perception of inflation returning. Now, the absolute returns will be more driven by the stock market because that's been a lot more volatile and it's the bigger leg of the two. But if you're asking, how do I position given this uncertainty, that over the last several years has been a good place to be.
Jim, what's so important here is we saw a Q4, and maybe I can go back to Q3. You probably know the day of the great shift where international did better, EM did better, and that's been a raging theme here in the year forward reviews. With the events of the last 24 hours, with oil touching up near $70 Brent, I mean, does it take the wind out of an international stock recovery? Is it a morning to go ever more U.S. blue chip because of what we've seen in Baghdad?
I don't think yet it would be. If, first of all, let's keep in mind the big rally that we've had in stocks over the last couple of weeks. We're only back to Monday or Tuesday levels on the stock market right now in the U.S.
Well said.
We haven't technically broken down or anything. We've just given back the last 2 days as well. If that's all we do, is that we just kind of give back a little bit and see about a volatility, then I do think that international rally will continue. If we continue to see climbing oil prices on more premiums of supply disruption, yes, that could definitely turn the tide against especially EM which is going to be so energy dependent on their economies, given their huge manufacturing bases.
I mean, John, this is a huge deal, whether it's David Kelly at J.P. Morgan or Kate Moore at BlackRock. I mean, the Q4 international rally, I don't think was widely seen by people. It's sort of buried in their 401ks where they don't notice it.
It's becoming a consensus call for 2020, though. The rest of the world of the United States. And because that is becoming a consensus call, we need to stress test it, Jim. We need to work out what we need, the sufficient economic recovery we need to see in places like Europe and China to justify it. Do you see it evolving, materializing in the coming quarters?
Yeah, well, I think the way you structured the question is the right question. The market, I'm going to use my football analogy, the market is like a quarterback who's throwing a 50-yard pass. It's, if you look at it, it looks like he's throwing it to an empty field, hoping that the receiver will run underneath it and catch it. Well, that's what the rally was in 2019, was that 50-yard pass. Now we're hoping that the fundamentals will catch up to justify the market. And by the way, that's the way it should work. The market should move ahead of the fundamentals. That's the way it worked in 2017. It had a big rally. 2018, we had huge earnings. 2018, the market struggled. 2019, we struggled with earnings. We'll have to see if that works out now, but I think your question is right. Will, in 6 months, the fundamentals get marketably better to justify what we've seen in the rallies, especially in international? I'm on the fence on that, to be kind of honest.
Yeah.
But that's where I think we have to develop the debate. The fundamentals aren't there now. Will they be there this summer? That's really what the question is.
What you just heard there, folks, is so important because so much in media is about certitude. And you just heard Mr. Bianco say, I'm on the fence. It's okay to be on the fence. That's what adults do.
Well, let's talk about what would be sufficient then, Jim. Do we need to see stabilization or real signs of a recovery? Walk me through the distinction and whether we need one more than the other.
I think we need real signs of a recovery. Stabilization is not going to be enough. Earnings in the U.S., just to use one number, is negative. Negative 1% in the third quarter. Expectations for the fourth quarter are another negative 1%. After 29% year, you just can't go to positive 1. That would be stabilization. I think you got to get back to at least the long-term average of something like an 8 or 10% on earnings growth. As far as the rest of the world goes, I think that European manufacturing is showing signs of stabilization. Okay, that's fine, but it's got to do more than just stop getting worse. It's got to start to recover, at least to start to see a recovery in the rest of the world as well, too. China is definitely struggling right now. Their GDP is at the lowest levels in 28 years right now. They've got to do better than just say, okay, we're just going to stabilize. They got to start moving forward. If they start doing that, then I think we've got the makings of holding the gains that we've seen through 2019. Yeah. If not, we're going to give some of that back, if not a lot of it.
Jim, many of us, including our listeners, and I'm sure including yourself, read a ton of 2020 outlooks over the holiday Christmas period. And Jim, one thing that surprised me is just how little the Fed features in many of these 2020 outlooks, just the belief that the Fed stays out of the game and doesn't hurt things. What's your view on that?
Well, I think what's driving a lot of that belief is two things. One, the Fed said they're going to be out, but then the Fed says a lot of things. Let's remember a year ago, the Fed said that they were going to raise rates multiple times in 2019, and they wound up cutting 3 times. The other thing that makes people think that they're going to stay out is it's an election year. So as you draft it further and further into the year, it becomes more and more unlikely the Fed moves unless they're forced. The famous example of that would be 2008, literally days before the election, we're doing extraordinary actions. I think that the bias for the Fed is going to be to cut rates. I think the bias for interest rates is going to be down. I think what's driving that is not an assumption of weaker growth, but that there isn't any inflation. And that, like I said earlier with the 60-40 portfolio, as long as you don't have any inflation, that works. And for 2 decades, I haven't seen any signs of inflation, and I still don't see those signs of inflation. Right. I do think they will emerge at some point in the future, just not on the immediate horizon. So I think that will bias the Fed if they were to move be a cut rather than a hike in 2020.
Jim Bianco, thank you so much. Writing for Bloomberg Opinion, Bianco Research, Chicago this morning. Futures negative 50 at one point, a little bit of a recovery, negative 36 right now. John?
Fed minutes coming up a little bit later, 2
I
p.m.
didn't know
Eastern.
that. Thank you.
A lot of Fed speak coming up as well. Michael McKee catching up with Chicago Fed President Charles Evans, who you spoke to a number of months ago. And this year, a voting member, Cleveland Fed Chief Loretta Mester.
It's a great mix there.
11 a.m. Eastern Time and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Coming up with Bloomberg's Michael McKee, the Fed in focus.
Our team, like you, our listeners, has scrambled since last night in the news out of Baghdad. We've tried to put together a wide set of voices. We thank particularly Mark Champion and particularly Sir Tom Beckett, who joined us very early this morning from Bahrain. He's truly one of the United Kingdom's great members of their military, the Lieutenant General. We're going to do that next. James Stavridis will join us. He's been a good friend of the show, Admiral Stavridis, with terrific perspective, not only as former Supreme Commander of NATO, but certainly with tours of duty on destroyers and fleets as well. John, I'm watching yen. It hasn't broken down, hasn't it? It's stronger, but not that stronger.
Crude came close to getting a 70 handle. It just pulls back a little bit. $68.82, up by 3.88% on the session. From New York this morning, good morning for our audience worldwide. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is a Bloomberg.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it up, add a boxing class, skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with P.
People.
No, parrot.
I'll have to remember my binoculars next time.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Every time you fill up and use Shell Go Plus, you'll be protecting and replanting forests around the world. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. The Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
I think the U.S. is going in for a couple of years of very, very strong growth.
The deficit by early in the next decade will start to become a real problem for the markets.
Finance.
The consumer is really strong right now.
We don't realize how good times are now.
Investment.
The biggest problem that people have in investing in stocks is that they get out of the market.
It's not supposed to be easy. Anyone who finds it easy is stupid.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance. John Farrow and Tom Keene. We say good morning to all of you. This historic day for the United States of America, for Iran, and for all of the Middle East. The news flow has been extraordinary. Let's do this, John. Let's do a quick data check. But first, let me say Bloomberg Surveillance, always brought to you by Cohn Resnick. Transform your tax game. The Cohn Resnick team can help dealmakers develop a winning tax strategy. Visit CohnResnick.com/tax insight. John, what do you see in the data before we get to James Stavridis?
Well, let's whip through the price action from 35,000 feet, shall we? Equity futures down 35 points on the S&P 500, down a little more than 1 full percentage point. Risk off. That means Havens bid, including treasuries, up, yields lower, down by 5 basis points to 182. In foreign exchange, the yen outperforms, as you might expect. And when there's tension in the Middle East, that means crude rallies. We're positive 3.86% on Brent, just short of $70 a barrel at $68, Tom, and 80 cents.
Very good. Right now, what we'd like to do is spend the entire half hour, with James Stavridis. He's the dean, former dean, I should say, of the Fletcher School at Tufts University. I can say he's former Supreme Commander for NATO. But John Farrell, that doesn't matter, because what he really is a former combat veteran on destroyers and on fleets as well. Admiral Stavridis, thank you so much for joining us. I want you to speak to the people listening to our show coast to coast who have family in the military. These people are out on platforms. They're in the Army, the Navy, the Marines, at all. At what risk is our military this morning?
Well, as usual, Tom, there's good news and bad news here. I'll start with the obvious bad news, which is that we have assassinated a leading Iranian political figure, and there will be repercussions. So Iran is going to lash out, and that will put our troops at risk and to some degree their family. Here's the good news, Tom. Our military is ready for this. Iran does not have the element of surprise here. At every base around the world, security is increasing. We're moving missile defense systems in place. We're ready, but it is going to be a very challenging time ahead. So my word for all of our military families, especially, and certainly our troops who are deployed, and they know this, is be ready, because Iran will respond.
What is so important here, and I go back to the Sheffield and the Argentinian War, is there's all these big plans and all of this work of big budgets and a Pentagon and that. And in 1975, it can be, 1982, it can be one Exocet missile, which was the feeling then, and that's the nakedness, if you will, of the American public. How do we defend at the Persian Gulf Gap? How do we defend in a geography where Iran could respond?
We've got to take a 360 view here, Tom. In other words, there's no silver bullet. No one missile defense system is going to save you. No one intelligence capability is going to give you perfect knowledge. No one defensive system against an incoming torpedo in the water is going to be perfect. But if you put all of those elements together, you've got a very good chance of defending yourself. And this is both at sea and ashore and in the air. And again, we're quite capable of this. I think we can handle just about anything Iran throws out. Tom, let me tell you one thing I worry about the most. It's cyber and cyber security. Here, I think our level of preparation is not as high relative to all the obvious kinetic military effects that Iran could launch against us. So for all who are involved in the cyber world today, heads up. They will use cyber against us.
Admiral Jonathan here. Let's explore that just a couple of steps further. Some of the American press, in fact the international press, may wish to paint Iran as some kind of reckless rogue state. They're incredibly calculating. Foreign policy is well thought out. And I'm just wondering if you can take us into the mind of the government within Iran right now, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the thoughts, the process they'll be going through to calculate their next step, their response.
Indeed. Let's look at what Iran's options are. And so in the Iranian equivalent of the Pentagon this evening, it is evening there, they will be looking at attacking our troops in Afghanistan, in western Afghanistan. They will look at perhaps going after that embassy in Baghdad again, although I think it's unlikely because it's now well defended. Yeah. They'll look at strikes against Israel. They will look at cyber attacks against the U.S. mainland, as well as our command and control overseas. And lastly, I think they'll look very seriously at the Persian Gulf, at maritime options.
Well, I'm going to get the map out here, and this is something, folks, I'm as weak on. Our Golnar Montevalli has helped me so much with the fabric of the large geography of Iran. Admiral Stavridis, you're expert at this. There's Tehran in 400 or 500 miles south. There's Kerman, Kerman. We've seen that image this morning of the people of Kerman silently in the streets, standing in mourning. And then if you go 300 miles directly south, you get to your Persian Gulf. It's distant from Tehran, but it's not, is it?
It is not. And of course, the Iranian military has very significant bases both inside the Persian Gulf, and then you go through the Strait of Hormuz into the North Indian Ocean, Tom, as you can see on your map.
Yeah.
And that is where the most significant of the Iranian naval bases are. And by the way, Iran China and Russia have just concluded a 2-week naval exercise in the northern Indian Ocean. So the Iranian fleet is preparing to move to sea. I think we will see a potential response from them.
I know John wants to get in here. Again, James Stavridis with us and will be with us through much of this half hour. Admiral Stavridis, when you say the Iranian fleet, what is that?
It's not remotely capable in the way that the U.S. fleet is, Tom, but I'll tell you 3 things they're pretty good at. They have diesel submarines, which are very quiet and capable of operating in the relatively shallow waters of the Persian Gulf and the North Indian Ocean. Secondly, they have small craft that they can deploy in high numbers in what are called swarm attacks. They have rocket-fired missiles on them, and you can send 20 of them to attack a big Navy destroyer, and that can be a problem. Third and finally, Tom, they have very capable cruise missiles, which they can launch both from at sea and from their naval platform. So they're certainly not the U.S. Navy. They're not 10 feet tall, but they can inflict real damage on a U.S. warship. We ought to be very concerned about that as the next few days unfold.
Admiral, you mentioned the war games taking place in the Gulf of Oman in the last week between Russia, China and Iran. What do you expect the response of Russia and China to be in the coming days?
They will undoubtedly condemn this attack. They'll portray it as an assassination of a political figure. They'll ignore the fact that Soleimani was not only the Machiavelli, the Cardinal Richelieu of violence in this Iranian hierarchy, but that he was also personally involved. He literally has blood on his hands. They'll ignore all that, and they'll portray this as a rogue U.S. military operation. I will say we had to recognize that Soleimani was deadly and evil, and taking his piece off the chessboard is tactically a good thing. What we have yet to do is lay out a strategy to deal with the after effects and the longer-term issues here.
Well, let's talk about that. The opportunity to take down General Soleimani existed in the presidency of George W. Bush, the presidency of Barack Obama as well. Those opportunities weren't taken, Admiral. Why not?
Because of the sense that would escalate a direct military confrontation between the U.S. and Iran. So that begs the question, why now? And my guess is that within the White House, the calculus was made that at this moment they have overwhelming evidence that Soleimani was behind the rocket attacks that killed contractor a couple of days ago, that he was behind the attacks on our embassy. He became a target of opportunity. His level of threat and level of violence has only increased since the days of both Bush and Obama. I think those 3 things came together, and the administration, as the words go in Top Gun, had a shot, Maverick, and they took it. So you can argue with whether or not that is pouring gasoline on a smoldering fire. I think it is. On the other hand, tactically, we are ahead for taking out Soleimani. Strategically, we still have work to do.
Let us continue with James Stavridis, and we'll do that here in moments. Futures at negative 32, Dow futures negative 237. John, what do you see on the screener from the headline news flow?
Bid in the bond market, yields lower by 5 basis points to 182 on a 10-year Tom. And in the commodity market, just short of $70 a barrel on Brent crude, up by 4 percentage points to $68 and around about 96 cents.
Very good. We're going to return with James Stavridis, and then we'll continue forward on the markets as well. As John mentions, oil, we did not get a 70 print, but oil elevated here, not only over the last 24 hours, but really over the last weeks as well. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
And now for the news from New York City, let's say good morning to Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Tom. President Trump tweeted this morning, Iran never won a war, but never lost a negotiation. The tweet comes after President Trump ordered a U.S. airstrike that killed one of Iran's most powerful generals, sending global markets tumbling as Iran's supreme leader threatened, quote, severe retaliation. The Defense Department says General Qassem Soleimani, who led proxy militias that extended Iran's power across the Middle East, was killed in the drone attack in Baghdad. Pope Francis is calling for governments to ensure that everyone has access to suitable health care In an annual papal message, the Pope urged healthcare institutions and government leaders today not to neglect social justice out of preoccupation for financial concerns. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John?
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Equity futures off the lows, just negative 1 percentage point on the S&P 500. We're down 31 points. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at bevel.com.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Cybersecurity trends in 2020 are including new mobile risks. In addition, hackers are also expected to employ machine learning in attacks, and the cloud will prove fertile ground for compromise. Let's bring in one of the most renowned experts in the field. It is Tom Kellerman of VMware. He served on the Commission on Cybersecurity under President Barack Obama. Tom, great to have you here. Arguably, really, 2020, one of the biggest years when it comes to cybersecurity and the threats. How big of a year are you seeing this as all of these different threats, election, hackers abroad, pretty much come to a head this year.
Well, yes, it has become a functionality of conducting business in today's world. You have to appreciate that all the major organized crime syndicates of the world have created business models around hacking. You have rogue nation states with dedicated cyber attack divisions. And then geopolitical tension continues to manifest in cyberspace with things like the trade war and other events that occur on the global stage.
Who, in your opinion, really poses the biggest risk in 2020?
Well, I think there's a shift in how hackers are hacking. They've moved away from burglary to home invasion. It's a lot more dangerous in that they will take over and commandeer your digital transformation efforts and use your infrastructure, your website, your mobile app, and your network to attack your customers.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Futures are lower. We're getting some numbers on Tesla fourth quarter deliveries. We go to the breaking news desk for today's morning call. Here's Bill Maloney. Bill, good morning.
And good morning, Karen. U.S. futures are under pressure, but off their lows since the last time we spoke. Dow futures now down 228 points. S&P's dropped 30, and NASDAQ futures declined by 97. The U.S. 10 yield at 1.83%. Gold is up 14, and WTI crude futures are up 4%. European markets are also under pressure, led by 1.4% declines in Germany. And back in the U.S. on the economic front at 10 o'clock, construction spending and ISM manufacturing, and at 2 o'clock, minutes from the FOMC. In other news, Tesla cut the prices of its China-built Model 3 sedans, and like you said, Q4 deliveries were 112,000, estimate was 104,000. And wrapping things up, Bank of America was cut to market perform over at BMO. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Karen?
All right, Bill, thank you. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type squawk on your terminal, SQUAWK, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and John.
Karen, thanks so much. We've been talking to Admiral Stavridis about the military impacts of the killing of this general of Iran, and it has been absolutely brilliant, particularly Admiral Stavridis' comments on what the Iranian Navy can do at the Gulf of Hormuz. Now let us turn to Washington, and I will say Dean Stavridis, formerly with the Fletcher School at Tufts University. This is occurring within the most polarized Washington of our lifetimes. How does that change the Washington debate that we are so polarized in our modern politics?
Unfortunately, Tom, there's no good news here. Let's face it, we're about to see an impeachment trial. We have an election in 11 months. It's the most, as you say, polarized, I would say highly charged environment I can remember in my lifetime, my adult lifetime. So the unfortunate part about it is that we used to have a philosophy that foreign policy makes sure that there's bipartisanship at the water's edge. That's not what we're seeing today. And I think you're going to see both Republicans and Democrats on divergent paths as we look at what we need to do going forward with Iran. And that's a mistake because we have to pull together as a team here, interagency working together, and indeed the branches of government working together.
Admiral Stavridis, one final question, if I may, this morning. Is the State Department any semblance of the State Department you have studied through your career, or is it essentially a State Department run out of the White House?
I would say in this administration, the moves of foreign policy are not strategic. As you know, Tom, we think back to George Kennan and the policy planning staff, the creation of the strategy of containment. That came out of the State Department into the interagency. Today, it's driven by the National Security Council staff. We have a relatively new National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, and we have a Secretary of State in Mike Pompeo, who is a very good tactical thinker, but hasn't created the long-term strategy that we'd like to see. So, yes, this is being driven largely by diplomacy of tweets. Think of it as shots of espresso into the system day after day, hour after hour, and that is not a good way to run foreign policy.
I will do out today a full-court press on the authorship of James Stavridis' important new book, chapter by chapter, on the admirals of the Navy, including Mr. Rickover, and I will, of course, mention his wonderful The Leader's bookshelf. Admiral James Stavridis, with us this morning. John?
It's one of those mornings where you've done your homework, your bottom-up analysis, you've picked your names, then you wake up and those names are down. Some of them are down hard, and you're wondering why, and what does this situation in the Middle East have to do with anything of the earnings of some of these companies that I'm invested in? James Bevan is one of those guys waking up this morning asking those questions, I'm sure. He's CCLA Investment Management CIO. So, James, walk me through how you're thinking about some of the issues that we're exploring this morning and your advice to some of the people experiencing the same difficulties.
John, at the moment, the challenges are unknown in terms of where this goes and exactly what happens, but my reading and expectation is that the principal driver of stock returns in 2020 will remain very accommodative policy from the world central bankers and a likely expansion of fiscal policy. And against that backdrop, I anticipate that fundamentally equities should have a strong year. So I am seeing any unmerited decline in pricing as a buying opportunity and not an opportunity to sell.
James, there is some hope that the rest of the world starts to outperform the United States. That hope being backed up by some capital as well. It seems to become the consensus view, increasingly so, as the days progress. James, where do you come down on that debate at the moment?
John, I remain distinctly pro-US in aggregate, simply because when I look at the companies I want to own, the price I have to pay for forward earnings growth and the probability that those earnings growth will be achieved, I still see a preponderance of US names. I'm deeply suspicious that the banking segment in Europe, which is held out as an area where people should be investing, is subject to material risk, which is not priced well by the market. And equally, if I were to look at the global marketplace, stock by stock, sector by sector, still regard the US actually as fundamentally cheap.
James Bevan, too short a visit this morning. I'm sorry, we'll get it much longer next time. With the news flow that we've had, it's been extraordinary, and we thank Mr. Bevan for putting up with all of this international relations. John, it's really amazing the addiction of the melt-up we've been on, and to see a pullback here, negative 28 on futures, how uncommon that has been in the recent weeks.
A melt-up might be the correct characterization of the later part of the year and the early part of 2020 as well, Tom. Some people think it had echoes of early 2018. Do you remember that? And then we rolled over quite aggressively going into February. The difference, yields really behaving coming into today. And down again for different reasons, but still in and around 180 on a US 10-year.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The folks, the dynamics of the yield market was so unusual given the melt-up, and it shows the unusual times that it is. We have to review oil very critically. I don't believe we've gotten out to $70 a barrel. We had a 69 handle on Brent crude. That is the international, the global price of oil, but we didn't get to 70. But on West Texas, John, nicely above $60, $3 above that, $63.40 West Texas Intermediate.
The market behaving in exactly the way you would expect it to behave on a morning like this, with geopolitical risk front and centre gripping investors, crude higher, treasuries bid, the yen outperforms, risk assets roll over, equities lower. Equity futures on the S&P 500 off the lows. We're now negative around about 0.86% on the S&P 500 and down around about 28 points. To give you a feel of the bond market, treasuries set up as follows. Yields lower by 5 basis points to 1.826% on a 10-year, 2.285% on a 30-year. Alongside it, Tom Keane, I'm Jonathan Ferro. You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Wall Street started out 2020 with new record highs, but we are headed for a lower open today, with Dow futures down around 242 points as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates. And this is also pushing oil higher. It's up about 4% at $63.57 a barrel. Trying to move tons of gold or whisk a dictator to safety? The company of choice for former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn's audacious escape from Japan this week was a Turkish charter operator called MNG, whose aircraft have helped with all of that and more. The dramatic development is drawing attention to the company and to the private world of charter flights. S&P futures down 32 points. NASDAQ futures down 104. Dow futures lower by 241. Yesterday on Wall Street, the broader U.S. equity market was up almost 1% to start the new year. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Why has J.D. Power...
Welcome to Nuffield Health Fulham, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a swimming pool, and our expert team will help you get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
You don't just live in one room, so why should you Wi-Fi? With Sky Broadband's Wi-Fi guarantee, you'll get Wi-Fi in every room or money back. Perfect for food shopping in the bedroom, gaming in your PJs in the lounge, or streaming sci-fi movies in the kitchen. Get Sky's super fast broadband and Wi-Fi guarantee. £32 a month for 18 months with $19.95 setup. Click on the banner now.
Sky Fibre errors, Sky Kit required. Refund on boost component of subscription paid during current minimum term up to date of claim. Minimum 3 megabits per second or money back. Prices may change during minimum term. See sky.com/guarantee.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio, looking ahead to a series of economic indicators through the morning right here on Bloomberg Radio. We do that with ISM manufacturing, ISM new orders, prices paid, employment. That comes up at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and then at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, you will get your Fed minutes. Those indicators are brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. So that's your guide for the rest of today, Tom. On the schedule, ISM 10 Eastern, then the FOMC minutes coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.
I mean, it's interesting to see with economic data. Before we get to Dr. Levy, I really have to point, as I was going out the door this morning, Vet Bill turned to me and said, it's Jobs Day. And I go, no, it's not. I mean, the dog was really on top of it.
That's what you said to the dog?
Yeah, no, the dog said to me, it's Jobs Day, isn't it? And I said, no, it's Friday, but it's supposed to be.
It's the first Friday of the month, but it's not. It's going to be next Friday.
That's unusual.
So we get the Fed minutes instead. What a treat.
It's a dog treat, Mickey Levy with us right now with Berenberg Bank.
I'm sure Mickey's very confused as to where this is going.
We've had very unusual coverage today with all that's going on in international relations. Let's try to get back a little bit here to classic economics. Dr. Levy, the great call for the Fed this year seems to be looking forward to inflation. My number 2 incoming mail is, what do you mean there's no inflation? Our listeners see inflation every day. Is there inflation out there or not?
Tom, great question. Prices of various goods and services are going up, but keep in mind, but actual inflation, the way the Fed measures it in quality adjusted terms, inflation is still low. So when the Bureau of Economic Analysis of the Department of Commerce measures inflation, they look at a wide array of goods and services. And then they don't just look at the price change. They adjust that price change for quality adjustment. So it does create a lot of confusion. So when you go to the supermarket, when you buy things, if you bought an average market basket of goods and services, you'd say, prices are going up. But in quality adjusted terms, somehow defined, they're not going up that much.
You're not selling me on this, Dr. Levy. Let's go back to the Fed then. I mean, Chairman Powell's brought this up a couple times before, looking at Cleveland and looking in his case at Dallas Trim, would show a higher inflation or not. Which inflation indicator does Dr. Levy use?
Well, I'm forced to look closely at the PCE,
forced
because that's what the Fed looks at. And by the way, it's the only government entity that focuses so much on the PCE, and it's the only central bank in the world that focuses on the PCE. Everybody else focuses on the CPI, and so I think it's important to look at the PCE, but also, as you just mentioned, some of the trim mean, where they take out some of the outlying price changes of individuals' goods and services, and looks at averages. And I'd say inflation's pretty low because nominal spending growth is still moderate, and businesses don't have much pricing power. So think of the following: inflation's going to be driven when there's excess demand for all goods and services relative to productive capacity. So productive capacity keeps increasing. We're getting more and more efficient in the distribution of goods and services. With current dollar spending in the economy growing moderately, businesses just don't have a lot of pricing power to increase prices a lot without losing market share.
Mickey, one thing that people have identified over the last 12 months, important development of the Federal Reserve, the shift in the reaction function. Mickey, how would you characterize that shift in the last year or so, and how important is it to you at the moment?
Oh, great question. I think the Fed's reaction function has been shifting over the last couple of years, and the way I think of it now is, subject to the 2% inflation constraint, the Fed perceives that it has flexibility to be aggressive in trying to generate new jobs, fine-tuning the economy. So subject to that constraint, they perceive they have a lot of flexibility. And that's a very different type of reaction function. So note that last year, even though the economy was growing at 2%, exactly where the Fed had been forecasting, the Fed lowered rates 3 times because it was uncertain about things. There's a lot of uncertainty about the impact of U.S.-China trade negotiations. So that just reflects the Fed's perception of their flexibility to do whatever they want when inflation's below 2%. And so I would add things up now and say the Fed in their minutes today and in the near term, they're going to say we're really comfortable with policy where it is, but
it's just obvious that the bar for raising rates from this point is higher than the bar for lowering rates.
Mickey Levy, thank you so much. With Berenberg Bank today, a bit of the Fed as we go to, is it John, January 29, I believe is the Fed.
You've looked, you're ahead of this on me.
It's out there. You know, I actually quoted yesterday the first 3 or 4 Fed meetings of the year getting out to 4th of July because to me, much like last year, it's a total mystery.
You and I have got to get to Davos, Switzerland first, haven't we?
We are doing this.
When's that, 2 weeks? 2 weeks
Is
away.
it really 2 weeks?
Just around the corner.
It's around the corner, so, and I must admit, I've got a real focus there on negative interest rates.
Is
so
the president coming?
This is a really important issue, and I read on this yesterday that he may sign something here, phase 1E, or they may actually
January 15th,
sign
I
at
understand.
the World Economic Forum meetings.
I thought that was pushed back. I thought it was January 15th. They're going to have the signing ceremony, and then the Chinese weren't coming to the World Economic Forum. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the programme. From New York this morning, good morning to all for our listeners worldwide. You're listening to Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg Radio, with equity futures recovering just a little bit. The S&P 500 down 31 points. And now for news from New York City, here is Michael Barr.
John, Tom, thank you very much. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is calling world leaders to defend President Donald Trump's decision to order an airstrike that killed Iran's top military commander. According to Mike Pompeo, he had spoken early today with the foreign ministers of Britain and Germany, as well as China's state consular. In each call, Pompeo said the U.S. is committed to de-escalating tensions in the Middle East that have soared in recent days. Iran's supreme leader has vowed harsh retaliation for the latest U.S. airstrike in Baghdad that killed the leader of the elite Quds force. Former NATO Supreme Allied Commander and Bloomberg opinion columnist James Stavridis says he was most worried about an Iranian cyber attack response after the U.S. strike against the general.
They're quite capable in this realm to launch a significant cyber attack against our financial institutions, our infrastructure, our educational system. They are highly capable in cyber. So look for horizontal escalation here by Iran.
President Trump tweeted this morning, Iran never won a war, but never lost a negotiation. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Report. Here's John Stashower.
Tom, the Nets knew they weren't going to have Kevin Durant this season. They thought they'd have Kyrie Irving. They haven't since mid-November. But last night's 123-111 loss in Dallas. Brooklyn has now dropped under 500 with a 4th loss in a row. Luka Doncic led the Mavs 31 points at 15 in the 4th quarter. Knicks will go for a 4th straight win tonight. They're in Phoenix. The Rangers were in Calgary. They fell behind early. They scored 2 goals in 25 seconds to tie the game at 2, and then they tied it at 3. But the Flames won 4-3. The Devils topped the Islanders 2-1. Baseball suspended Yankee pitcher Domingo Germán for 81 games, reduced to 63 based on time served last season. Germán was involved in a domestic violence incident, had ended his 2019 campaign. He had won a team-high 18 games for the Yanks. His suspension is the longest in a domestic violence case where there were no criminal charges. The Mets introduced their new reliever, Dellin Betances, who's like the New York City Marathon. Betances has touched all 5 boroughs.
New York is in my blood, you know. I grew up playing in the Lower East Side. I went to high school in Brooklyn. In 2007, I played minor league ball in Staten Island. In 2011, I made my major league debut in the Bronx. And now I stand here, getting the chance to wear this Mets uniform and playing in Queens.
In Betances' final season with the Yanks, he missed all but 1 game with 2 different injuries. NFL playoffs kick off tomorrow with the 2 AFC wildcard games. Dallas Cowboys have reportedly cut ties with longtime coach Jason Garrett. The Giants will today interview former Green Bay coach Mike McCarthy. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Tom?
John, thanks so much. Futures negative 50 earlier and are negative 32, so we've seen a little bit of elevation off of how difficult things were 2 hours ago. The VIX 14.83, that is a movement of 2.36 figures in the VIX, and we do it with a yield that was negative 6 basis points. Well, we're still there. Negative 6 basis points on the 10-year yield, coming in abruptly from near 2%, 1.82%. Fractional dollar strength. We're watching yen 108.11, stronger yen as you would expect. This is Bloomberg.
As
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
This is your boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run, mix it.
Don't want to miss a second of the NFL playoffs? Set reminders with TuneIn to stay in sync with the postseason. Just make sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search for your team on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when live coverage begins.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now. You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
News and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, U.S. airstrike. The United States has killed Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, in an airstrike near Baghdad's international airport.
So far, we have not heard anything from the president except that one tweet, the picture of an American flag with no words next to it. That was as we were still waiting for the administration to confirm that, yes, it was the United States behind this attack, which they later did in a statement from the Pentagon, which they say it was carried out at the direction of the president.
There's Caitlin Collins. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is calling world leaders to explain Trump's decision to order the hit.
The American people should know that President Trump's decision to remove Qasem Soleimani from the battlefield saved American lives. There's no doubt about that. He was actively plotting in the region to take actions, a big action as he described it, that would have put dozens, if not hundreds of American lives at risk.
Iran has vowed a, quote, harsh revenge, end quote, over the incident. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Tesla delivered a record 112,000 cars in the final 3 months of 2019 as buyers rush to take advantage of subsidies being dialed back or eliminated altogether in 3 key markets this year. And we are watching Tesla in early trading up 1.1%. The risk-on sentiment that ushered in the new year taking a hit as tension between the U.S. and Iran escalates. U.S. stock index futures are falling. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures down about 30 points. Dow futures down 232. NASDAQ futures down 94. The DAX in Germany is down 1.4%. 10-year Treasury up 15/30 seconds. Yield 1.82%. Yield on the 2-year 1.53%. NYMEX crude oil is up 3.6% or $2.20 at $63.38 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.25% or $19.40 at $15.4750 an ounce. The euro 1.1141 against the dollar. British pound 1.3086. And the yen is at 108.15. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom.
Karen, thank you so much. Team Surveillance has done just such a wonderful job today to get perspective from military, from those of international relations, and indeed from finance on these events in Baghdad and the silence we see in the streets of Kerman, Tabriz, and Tehran, in Iran, and of course the responses in Washington. We do that now and sum that now with a Brigadier General. Mark Kimmett is with the Army. He is formerly serving with the State Department as well. We're thrilled he could join us. I should mention, as unusual, he is expert in finance with his CFA as well. General Kimmett, I have to rip up the script this morning with you, and I want to take you from the staffing and strategy you are acclaimed for back to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and that is the United States Army Field Artillery School. How does our military, with traditional events, as you were once a field artillery officer, how do we dovetail that military into the new military that needs to defend against unique Iranian strategies?
Well, first of all, this is not the same Army that my father was in 1954 at Fort Sill when I was born. That was a very heavy conventional Army that relied on tanks, artillery, airplanes. We do have those same capabilities these days, and if we have a conflict with Iraq, we will certainly use some of those capabilities. But that's not the way that Iran will fight us. It will fight us in an unconventional manner, and that's something that our unconventional forces have become premier experts in the world on. You take a look at the Special Forces, which were virtually nothing in 1954 to now the capabilities that they can bring to the battlefield. They're also going to fight us not only unconventionally with troops, they'll also use drones, they'll also use missiles, they'll also use other kind of capabilities, targeted assassinations. We've been training for decades on these types of conflicts. We're not perfect at it, but we're pretty damn good at it.
Within all this, and as Admiral Stavridis told us a bit ago, there is a new warfare that James Stavridis talks about, which is cyber war as well. You're again attuned as an expert on this. Explain exactly how Iran commits cyber war against the people of the United States?
Well, first of all, let me clarify. I am no longer in the Army. I am
retired.
Right,
please. Yes, of course.
And second, I would say Jimmy Stavridis has it exactly right. If you take a look at the types of war in the shadows that is going on right now on the internet, probably the best example of that is when a combined effort went after the Stuxnet capability, used the Stuxnet to stop the Iranian capability, the centrifuge capability. That we have that capability, they have that capability. Of course, what they will try to do is attack some of our critical infrastructure. And the important thing is they may have an offensive capability. The important thing is how good is our defensive capability. They've got Tehran, we've got Silicon Valley. They've got a bunch of IRGC guys running around screaming death to America. We have a bunch of millennials sitting in cubicles out in Silicon Valley. And I think we've got the better deal on that. I think we'll be able to defend against anything they try to throw at us.
In the time that we've got left, we can go back to your father, who had a nodding acquaintance with the machinery of the Senate a few years back. It was a less polarized Senate. How does General Kimmett, how do you perceive a deeply polarized Washington, and is that a deterrence to the Pentagon?
Well, it's not a deterrence to the Pentagon. It's certainly, in some ways, an impediment to the Pentagon.
Thank you. Better said.
We would like to see a bipartisan Congress, even if bipartisan decisions are not necessarily what the Pentagon believes in. But this fist fight that's going on up there, where you've got one side of the aisle screaming at the other side of the aisle, it doesn't do for the Pentagon what we need it to be doing, making bipartisan decisions for the best interest of the United States of America. And that's what we could use right now.
Well, it's what we could use right now, and certainly what the Pentagon requests. And some would say, whether Republican or Democrat, that the Trump administration is original. Is it a factor that it's such a different administration method versus previous Republican and Democrat administrations?
There are two sides of that coin. On one side of the coin, one would argue that the conventional way of doing diplomatic relations, negotiations that we've seen for years and years in places such as North Korea haven't worked. And as President Obama once said, when you've been doing the same thing for 50 years and it doesn't work, then try something new. This president is certainly trying something new, particularly in the areas of foreign policy. He is taking a risk with this action that he took over the past 24 hours. I certainly hope his advisors and the Pentagon are prepared for the inevitable backlash that we're going to see. Whether it will lead to the end to the 40-year conflict that we've had with Iran is yet to be seen, but that's what we pay presidents to do.
Well, I guess it's all germane, but what is so important here, and Mark Kimmett, again, you have the synthesis of this within Washington, is somewhat the cliche, getting everyone on the same page. We have a State Department that's certainly original. I think Secretary of State Pompeo would even admit that. The Pentagon is a Pentagon, and then we've got, as you mentioned, the fractured politics. Do you have any sense that these events of the last 24 hours will get people on the same page?
I don't think so, if for no other reason than it's an election year. However, if it elevates to the point where we have some pretty bleak scenarios where we have outcomes such as large number of American troops killed, embassies being attacked, that may rally everyone to a common effort. But I think as long as we are seeing the conflict and the crisis at a moderate level, I think you're going to see both sides of the aisle come out with different press statements. None of them completely self-serving, but none of them completely with the interests of the United States in mind.
General Kimmett, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated. Mark Kimmett, of course, retired Brigadier General of the United States Army. His service also at the State Department. We greatly appreciate it this morning. It has been an extraordinary day with futures at negative 30, Dow futures negative 50 earlier. I can go to any summary of the headlines that we've seen. I should point out that Secretary Pompeo has been out on various networks, Fox News, I know, and CNN as well, making comments. Certainly the Bloomberg headline says it all. This is our Jennifer Jacobs writing out of Washington with Nick Wadhams, who appeared with us earlier. U.S. says airstrike against Iranian thwarted, quote, imminent attack, which is what it says. Paul Sweeney, it's amazing how the discussion can change in 24 hours.
Absolutely right, Tom. You wake up and obviously the headlines really grab the day here and kind of set the narrative, not only for today, but probably for the foreseeable future here. So we'll have to see how things develop, but clearly financial markets are recognizing the potential severity of this issue.
I'm looking at yen as a litmus paper here, 108.14. It was a stronger Japanese yen 3-4 hours ago. We've given that back a little bit with the ebb and the futures declined. So I could say there's a pause here at least over the last 2 or 3 hours, but certainly news flow will be very important. I'm looking right now, Paul, we had a presidential tweet earlier, and I'm looking here, folks, as we try to do to keep up with this. Yes, we have the president tweeting moments ago. Let me try to get this in here. We had an earlier tweet, Paul, after very quiet President Trump on his favorite medium. Iran never won a war, but never lost a negotiation. Now 2 longer tweets crafted by the president. General Qasem Soleimani has killed or badly wounded thousands of Americans over an extended period of time and was plotting to kill many more, but got caught, exclamation point. He was directly and indirectly responsible for the death of millions of people, including the recent large number of all caps protesters killed in Iran itself. While Iran will never be able to properly admit it, Soleimani was both hated and feared within the country. They are not nearly as saddened as the leaders will I have to re-say this. I'm not sure it's correct. They are not nearly as saddened as the leaders will let the outside world believe. There it is. He should have been taken out many years ago, exclamation point. Paul, you think we're going to see much more from the president through the next 24 hours?
I think we will, Tom. And of course, I think the next thing will be what kind of retaliation will the world see from Iran? So again, escalating tensions here in the Middle East. That's certainly the news of the day. Certainly pushing markets here. We have the S&P down 31, the Dow futures down 250. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute.
Boredom, fitness enemy number 1. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run. Splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
Had the same job for the last 15 years. Working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole. What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Haskell gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance, Economics.
The good news is the economy is strong. The bad news is the economy is strong.
Financial crises take a really long time to recover from.
Finance.
The strong job market's pulling people back in.
You can't have for very long, monetary union without a fiscal union.
Investment.
What we preach is extreme diversification. It's hard to have sustained productivity without capital investment.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Bloomberg Surveillance from New York. We welcome all of you worldwide to Change America with the news of Baghdad, of the killing of an Iranian general. We should make clear that he is considered a war hero in Iran. Paul Sweeney, the video this morning of Tehran, Kerman, deep to the south, into the northwest, Tabriz, was extraordinary. The morning in Iran.
Absolutely, Tom. It's significant news for not just Iran, but for the Middle East and relations there. So, again, a very big move by President Trump and this administration. And I think what the world's, thinking about right now is what type of retaliation response will we get from Iran, and how will it affect overall Mideast issues?
We've had good conversation this morning on that. Our Mark Champion in London, writing our senior Middle East correspondent. James Stavridis joining us. Mark Kimmett joining us, the former Brigadier General of the United States Army. We'll do more on this here through the next hour and through all the day on Bloomberg Radio. We have tried to look also at a Fed with minutes out today. Michael McKee with two important conversations coming up with Charles Evans of Chicago, Loretta Mester of Cleveland, 11 a.m. As well. We'll look on that. That'll be Charles Evans, I believe, at the 11 o'clock hour as well. And part of that is the markets. At negative 50 earlier, David Wilson said he wouldn't come back in the studio until we went down. We got that today, David. Give us a quick equity update here within all of this news on international relations.
Well, you're seeing a lot of broad moves tied to that U.S. airstrike in one way or another. I mean, you look at technology stocks, the way they've fallen in early trading. Apple and Microsoft both down about 1%. In the chip industry, Advanced Micro Devices and NVIDIA lower by about 1.5%. You're seeing the banks falling, notably Bank of America down 1.5%. They were cut to the equivalent hold from by BMO Capital Markets, which said the stock was too costly after rising about 21% in the fourth quarter. Bank of America down 1.5%. You're seeing similar declines in their peers, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo. You look at the airlines, they're lower in response to higher oil prices, which of course may lead to increases in their jet fuel costs. American and Delta down 2.5%, Southwest and United lower by 2%. And on the other hand, the oil stocks are rising. I mean, you've got ExxonMobil up 1%, Occidental Petroleum up 2%, and in oil services, Halliburton up 3%, and Schlumberger up 2%. You're also seeing gains among the defense stocks. The idea being that if you've got conflict in the Middle East, it increases the odds that the U.S. is going to be stepping up their defense spending. Grumman higher by 2%, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon up 1.5%. And then you have stories that aren't connected to what's happening in the wake of the airstrike. They're more company specific. Tesla is one example there. It's up 1.5%. The electric car maker delivered a record 112,000 vehicles in last year's fourth quarter. Buyers took advantage of subsidies that are being cut back or eliminated this year in the U.S., China, and the Netherlands. You've got earnings out of Lamb Weston Holdings. That stock's up 3.5%. The maker of frozen French fries posted fiscal second quarter earnings and revenue that beat analyst average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. On the other hand, Insight down 10.5%. The drug maker's proposed treatment for a disease related to bone marrow and stem cell transplants failed to meet the main goal of a final stage study.
I want to go back. I know we've been going here, but on Tesla, I mean, with all the other news, so we've got to get to Margaret Brennan here in a moment. But David Wilson, basically, this is a huge thumb up for Tesla, right?
Well, it is. I mean, the real question is, now that these subsidies are being scaled back, can Tesla maintain its sales pace and eventually be a more functioning business? That's the challenge for them. Got a couple more real quick. Anixter International is up 1%. Wesco International raised its takeover offer for the industrial distributor by $3.50 a share to $97. That was a day after private equity firm Clayton Dubilier and Rice matched Wesco's previous offer. And L Brands up 3%. The owner of retailers Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works was raised to buy from neutral at Bank of America.
David Wilson, thank you so much. Futures negative 30 after 50 earlier. We've talked to James Stavridis this morning. We've talked to Mark Kimmett, of course, with their expertise in the Pentagon. And with a certain authority here is Margaret Brennan. You, of course, know her from Face the Nation at CBS. We'll talk a minute about this Sunday show, which I'm sure she's blowing up and destroying right now and rebuilding. But Margaret, I really thought of you about your tour of duty covering state for CBS. We heard Secretary Pompeo on Fox News today, on CNN. I'm sure he'll do a walkthrough with CBS at some point. How different is the State Department now versus the State Department of a few years ago or of 2011 on a killing of Osama bin Laden?
Oh, completely different. I mean, the silence was deafening last night. Many State Department officials, lead policymakers for the Middle East were in the dark about this. And this is the kind of assassination of a leader that is sort of a step above taking out a bin Laden or a Baghdadi in terms of actually challenging a state and having a war footing. So this is incredible. And Secretary Pompeo this morning is making these oblique, kind of mysterious references to imminent threats to the U.S., and we just don't have any explanation yet.
Well, you go right to the heart of the matter. I'm going to frame this, Paul Sweeney, as I did earlier. I was with Nora Rubini on the stage at the Milken Institute. I have the clearest memory of the taxi cab ride from LAX, Margaret, with an Ethiopian cab driver in tears over to the Beverly Hills whatever. I mean, that was such an important moment for America, the killing of Osama bin Laden. And you're suggesting this is actually a larger event?
Well, I do not mean in any way to lessen 9/11 by any stretch of the imagination. But what really has the national security implications long term for the United States were the dominoes that fell after bin Laden. That was, or after bin Laden's attack on the United States, rather than the assassination of him. It was the war in Iraq. It was the war in Afghanistan. It was the U.S. actions that were triggered by the event itself, rather than a decade later, the targeting and killing of a terrorist leader. Qasem Soleimani was considered an enemy of the United States. He has blood on his hands of at least 600 U.S. servicemen, thousands of Middle East nations on his hands. But he was also a right-hand man to the supreme leader of Iran. This is like targeting the vice president, CIA director in the United States. This is an act of war, and this is a dramatic escalation, and a dramatic escalation after Iran has been ratcheting up tensions incredibly over the past 2.5 years at the direction of Soleimani after the U.S. pulled out of that Iran nuclear deal. The sanctions the Trump administration has piled on have not stopped Iran from meddling. It did not stop Soleimani. Assassinating him takes out the leader. Does it kill the organization? No.
Margaret, I know it's very, very early hours for this story, just haven't broken overnight, but within the Beltway, are you getting any sense of kind of what the folks in Washington believe the next steps will be? Expectations for some type of retaliation, I guess?
Well, yes. I mean, there are obviously a lot of people going to worst case scenarios there, and I do not want to be hyperbolic here, but we are seeing, messages of increased security from mayors across the country about the U.S. homeland. We are seeing, worst case scenarios being drawn up by U.S. allies who are concerned that Iran may ditch what remains of that nuclear deal that it has with the world powers that President Trump pulled out of, but still has been in place. Does this make Iran decide to go forward?
Right.
There is a lot of back of the envelope sort of risk assessment here. And that is why it is so incredible, really, the Trump administration hasn't explained what comes next. And they are saying this is to de-escalate. Most allies and adversaries are saying this is escalatory.
Margaret, instead of asking who your guests are in Face the Nation, because I'm sure you're working on a new show right now, what is your number one question Sunday morning, whether it's a politician or someone from the military, et cetera? What's your number one Face the Nation question Sunday?
How does this end? Is America safer?
I agree. Is America safer? That's been one of our themes today. Margaret Brennan, thank you so much. Of course, with Face the Nation, you can see it on CBS Sunday morning. You can hear Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on Bloomberg Radio Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m. in New York, Washington, D.C., and now Bloomberg 1061 Boston. New report, Face the Nation this Sunday at 2 on Bloomberg Radio. Paul, I remember when they said we're going to redo the Sunday talk shows in the afternoon. I was like, yeah. It's thunderously popular.
Absolutely, and we have Bloomberg carries obviously all of the shows on Sunday, and it just gives you a sense of kind of what the key topics are facing the nation at any given time. And of course, Margaret Brennan and her team, I'm sure, as you mentioned, Tom, are ripping up the script literally as we speak, trying to position the Sunday show to give some perspective to what just happened over the last 24 hours.
It's a nice segue to say to our team surveillance beginning in London at 3 a.m. New York time, just completely blowing up all that we did today. Leading off strong with Thomas Beckett, Sir Tom Beckett of the United Kingdom military, their former lieutenant general, to give us terrific Middle Eastern perspective. Futures are negative 31 from New York. This is Bloomberg.
Let's get national headlines right now with Michael Barr. Michael.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Tom. Mourners chanted death to America and death to Britain after a major general who leads Iran's elite Quds force was killed in a U.S. airstrike outside Baghdad airport. The Pentagon says Major General Qasem Soleimani died in the airstrike. President Rouhani is promising on Twitter shortly after that he would take revenge on the U.S. for the death of Soleimani. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer dug in on his demand that the Senate impeachment trial of President Trump include new documents and testimony after revelation of administration emails that show officials question the legality of delaying aid to Ukraine. It comes as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will deliver remarks on the Senate floor today. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Tom.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Futures negative 31, Dow futures negative 250. That places the Dow futures at 28,591. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power...
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it, run, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
Psst, we've got something to tell you about the Honda Jazz. We know it looks small, but inside, it's really big. That's why we've created the small but big Jazz event, where you can get 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing on all grades until the 31st of January. The Honda Jazz, the small car with the big offer. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Here's Sherry Ann.
Joining us now is Mainstay Capital Management founder, CEO, and chief investment strategist David Kudla. We are seeing a bit more calm in the repo markets. The Fed, of course, injecting more than $240 billion or so into the system. But what happens once that starts to run off? This is supposed to be temporary liquidity, no?
Well, it's supposed to be temporary liquidity. But if you look at what Kathleen, look at everything she covered there, and she covered a lot of ground. And it's important not only in terms of what's happening to rates or what the Fed is doing, but it's important for those of us investing, or me as an investment strategist, because the Fed has had such an impact on the financial markets. It's not just about what happens with interest rate policy. They could be on hold for the remainder of this year. They could be on hold until the election, which is probable. I think they try to get interest rate cuts